Hello and welcome to Two Guys One Game. In this video we're going to be taking a look at some games based on classic Disney movies, because everyone likes the Disney classics, right? Now, how about I shut the hell up and we take a look at some games. Let's start by going under the sea on the SNES and take a look at the Little Mermaid. The story here is kind of different to the movie, so I guess it's more of an accompaniment than an actual exact replica of the movie, which we normally get with SNES tie-in games. The first thing to note is that it's a Capcom game, which automatically gave me reasonable hopes for the game, and you know what? It's actually pretty decent. You of course play as Ariel, who has to set out to defeat the evil Ursula, who is being a pain in the ass as always. All this is done in a side-scrolling fashion as you'd expect. To attack, you whip your tail back and forth and trap enemies in bubbles. Most enemies will need multiple tail whips to properly trap them, and once they're trapped you can grab them and throw them into each other, defeating them. There's also shells here and there that you can find, which as well as defeating enemies can be used to thrown into chests, which will open them, but not Ariel's chest, you creep. In the chests you can get various power-ups that make your attacks stronger or the range further, or you can just find treasure that gives you points. As you can see, the game looks pretty decent, with a lot of colour, and the animation is pretty good here too. It all looks just like the cartoon, well, as much as it can do on an 8-bit system. The Little Mermaid has some of the most memorable songs of all the Disney movies, and the music here, while not quite as catchy, is still pretty good, and it fits it well. It definitely has that all-round Capcom look and feel to it. There isn't too much to complain about here, but if I had to, I would say that the control is pretty stiff, and there's times where I took damage where I don't think I really should have done. However, the game is pretty easy, so it wasn't ever really a problem. You get plenty of continues, and you can take a few hits. In fact, I completed this all in under half an hour the first time I even played it, but I have to say it was still pretty enjoyable. No one ever really talks about this one when they talk about Disney games, but I'd say it's definitely worth playing if you're a fan of the movie, or just want a quick, easy game to kill half an hour. Over to the Super Nintendo now for the Jungle Book. This side-scrolling platform game loosely follows the plot of the film. In fact, let's just assume that all the games here loosely follow the plots of the films. So you get to play as Mowgli, and you have to side-scroll your way around some really freaking hard levels. Now, the jungle is a dangerous place, so understandably there are plenty of things out to kill you. Thankfully, you have an unlimited supply of bananas which you can throw at enemies. You can also collect other fruit as you play, which act like grenades and that sort of thing. They all work pretty well, and you can just about jump on most enemies to defeat them too. But watch out, because if you're going to do this, the hit detection is a bit dodgy. Now, something you would have noticed is that the game looks awesome, and you'd be right. The graphics and animation here are fantastic. The levels all look good too, with lots of layers of scrolling. The levels are also pretty damn big, and you'll be climbing up trees and swinging on vines a lot. What is an issue though is that although everything looks good, you don't see too much ahead of you, so it's only really when you run into enemies that you'll see them. And there's far too many blind jumps here. A lot of the levels boil down to trial and error, unless you take it really slowly. And I'm going to level with you here. I couldn't get very far in this game at all. I got to the level after fighting Car and then just ran out of lives and continues, and to be honest, I didn't really want to try again. Car was one of the most unfair, frustrating boss fights I've ever played, and it was only the first one. Now, I've heard that back in these days, developers deliberately made their games hard to stop people from renting them over a weekend and then never playing them again. But come on, this is a Disney game. Clearly it's aimed at kids and it's going to be their main target. Does it need to be this hard? Of course, it could just be that I'm crap. It's up to you if you want to try this game out. I'm not too fond of it, but let me know what you think. Jungle Book also came out on the Mega Drive, and it is kind of similar, but by no means the same game. In fact, it's a lot more enjoyable. It doesn't look or sound quite as good as the Super Nintendo version, but it still looks and sounds decent. It does have that annoying thing where you have to collect a certain number of items on each level before you can go to the next one, which I'm really not a fan of. But the timer is always pretty generous here, and the diamonds that you have to collect are pretty much everywhere, so the chances are you have them all by the time you get to the end of the level anyway. The levels here are all pretty different, and thankfully your sprite is a lot smaller, giving you much more of a better view what's going on. But the hit detection here is still dodgy when you're jumping on enemies. But if you are after some of the bare necessities, this is definitely the version to play. Yes, don't worry, we're going to look at Aladdin. Here is the SNES version made by Capcom. It's a fantastic platform game where you play as, you'll never believe it, Aladdin, and you have to of course stop the evil Jafar. The game looks and sounds great with some fantastic animation. Yes, I know, I'll come on to the Mega Drive version in a minute. There's loads of colour here and everything looks great. The music sounds like it could have come straight from the movie too. The game also is one of the most satisfying jumping on heads that I've ever played in a game. The sounds and physics of it all just sound so good, and if you've ever played the game you'll know what I mean. You can also throw apples at enemies to stun them. Oh, and something that people always seem to miss in this game is that early on you collect a rag which you can use to glide slowly, so you can jump further from some of the bigger jumps. You'll know if you have it, because it's up there next to the apple in the top right of the screen. Just hold the R button to use it. You're welcome. You get passwords as you progress, however I don't think these are ever really needed, as the game is pretty short and not that challenging. You'll likely beat it after a few tries, but it is really fun, so you'll probably be coming back to try it out every now and then. Apart from the levels where you're escaping from the cave, that level is just annoying. Something else that annoys me about the game, which might seem pretty nitpicky, is the bonus stage where you're spinning a roulette wheel. It just takes forever to stop, and there's no way to speed it up or to skip it. Maybe I'm just impatient, but it just seemed to take so long. Look at this. Come on, that's not just me, is it? I actually found myself avoiding collecting the scarab that takes you there. Other than that though, Aladdin is a must-have game for your Super Nintendo. And here's Aladdin for the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis if that's how you choose to live your life. This one is not made by Capcom, but Virgin Games, who actually had the Disney animators help develop it, which is why you'll notice that the game is one of the best looking games on the system. There's definitely no denying it. The game here looks incredible, and the animation is possibly the best on the Mega Drive. The game plays very differently to the SNES version. Here you have a sword that you use to murder the guards, just like in the movie. Oh no wait, he only used a sword for about 20 seconds in the movie, and that was just to smash Jasmine out of a giant sand timer. Never mind. While having a sword is actually pretty cool, it's not actually that good to use. The hit detection here is strange and floaty, and you'll often get hit while you're trying to attack, which can get frustrating, especially against the bosses. Also, the level design here isn't that great. There's plenty of levels with bottomless pits and cheap one-hit deaths, which are fine once you learn where they are, but it's still annoying. And there's also a lot of sections where you have to run behind scenery, which is cool at first, but it can get a bit tedious. Now don't get me wrong, this is still a very good game, but don't be fooled by the fact that it looks so good. It still has its problems, and if you ask me, the Super Nintendo version is the better one of the two. Still, you can't go wrong with either of these Aladdin games. Back to the Super Nintendo now for Pinocchio, where you take control of the wooden-nosed freak on his quest to become a real boy. You guessed it, it's a side-scrolling platform game, and it's a pretty average one at that. Much like the other games we've looked at, the graphics and animation here are actually superb. It's just the gameplay that can't quite live up to these high standards. Most of the levels see you having to find a certain item to be able to move on, but it's never really clear where you need to go, and there's often multiple paths to get lost on. But at least it looks good while you're finding your way, right? Here, the game also has those annoying levels where you need split-second reactions. Here, it's on a roller coaster, which moves really fast, and you have to jump or duck to avoid obstacles. It's just that you're not given enough notice. There are signs that tell you if you need to jump or duck, but the animation takes longer than it does for you to get there, so even if you do crouch in time, you'll still get hit and die. It's very cheap, and these sort of things seem to always crop up in these games. Once you've learned where it all is though, I'm sure you'll make it through. Pinocchio can run and jump, and he also has a strange spinny kick thing to attack, which is actually pretty useless for most part. I'm pretty sure that I got hurt more than the enemies whenever I tried to use it. There's also these bits where you take control of Jiminy Cricket. This doesn't really add anything to the game though, and in fact using his umbrella to attack seems more useless than Pinocchio's kick. Overall, this isn't the greatest game. It's definitely my least favourite in the video. It's playable, but I wouldn't say it's a terrible game. It's just very frustrating, in fact more frustrating than fun. Oh, and yes, it did come out on the Mega Drive, or Genesis if that's how you choose to live your life, as well. It's pretty much the same game. There's a few small differences in the level design, and it doesn't look quite as good or sound as good as the Super Nintendo version, although it might just be me, but it does seem to run slower. Either way, unless you have to play every Disney game, you might as well give this one a miss. And finally for today, let's check out Pocahontas for the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis if that's how you choose to live your life. The game is a puzzle platformer where you switch between playing as Pocahontas and her little raccoon buddy Miko. Between them you'll need to run, jump and climb and swim all over the place to do whatever it is that you're meant to be doing. The game has a deliberately slow pace to it, and it's one of those more cinematic games with some really fluid animation. The graphics themselves are good, but definitely not as detailed as most of the others we've looked at here. But yes, the animation is excellent. Though this is also one of the things that's a bit annoying about the game, as it can make the controls seem very stiff. You need to wait for animations to finish before you can start a new one, so even crouching can take a few seconds, which is just too long. But again, maybe I'm just impatient. Also, swimming is just very slow and it takes a couple of seconds just to turn around. It doesn't sound too bad, but when you're playing, you just want it all to be a bit faster, trust me. As you progress, you'll find animals that you can help, or you can make friends with them. Once you've helped them out, they'll give you abilities, which is pretty cool. Some will let you run faster, some will let you swim, or be able to fall from high areas without taking damage. It's actually pretty fun figuring out what you need to do. When you're playing as Miko, you can collect pine cones if you really want to, but you aren't penalised if you don't, so most of the time I didn't bother unless they were right in front of me. Another thing that is a little annoying is that you can only go so far with one of the characters, and then you have to switch to the other character to get them to catch up. Usually there's obstacles up ahead that the characters have to get past, so you'll need to switch between them to clear the way. This is fine, and it's actually a pretty nice idea, except that the other characters don't automatically follow you. You have to manually switch to them if you want them to move anywhere. Why they couldn't just catch up with you on their own, I don't know. Thankfully, the music here is pretty decent, which helps ease the pain, and there aren't really any enemies in the game, so you don't have to worry about your characters getting attacked while you're not playing as them. Overall, it is actually a decent puzzle platform game. As long as you go in knowing that it's a slower paced, more relaxed kind of game, then you'll probably enjoy it. It is worth playing if you haven't tried it. So there you go, a bunch of Disney games that I've played, so you don't have to. I did originally have The Lion King in here too, but unfortunately the footage was ruined. Thanks El Gato. But there's plenty more Disney classics where these came from, so I'm sure there'll be a follow-up video in the future. And what are some of your favourite video games based on Disney classics? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, we upload new videos when we've made them, and you can check out the Two Guys One Game podcast where we talk about all things gaming. Just search for us anywhere you get your podcasts, including Spotify. And why not follow me on Instagram? I've got hundreds of retro and modern video game reviews on there. Just search for The Reviews Brothers. And now, all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.